What happens when a billionaire's ultimate betrayal backfires in the most humiliating way? In a single shocking twist, the mistress's dream turns to disaster as the pregnant wife reveals a secret that changes everything. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the penthouse as Isabella Montgomery Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her manicured fingers pressed against the cool glass. 43 floors below, Manhattan buzzed, with its usual chaos, but up here in her gilded prison, silence reigned supreme. At 32, she possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that graced magazine covers, platinum blonde hair that caught light like spun silk, emerald eyes that could pierce through lies, and a figure that pregnancy had only enhanced with a radiant glow. 6 months pregnant with twins, Isabella had never felt more alone. Her husband of 5 years, Marcus Sterling, had left before dawn again. The CEO of Sterling Global Industries, worth an estimated $8.2 billion, claimed another crucial merger demanded his attention. But Isabella knew better. She had known better for months now. The Cartier watch on her wrist, a guilt gift from last month, chimed softly. 9 a.m. Marcus would be in his office now, the corner suite on the 47th floor of the Sterling Tower, the same building that had been her wedding gift 5 years ago. A building she legally owned, though Marcus had convinced her early in their marriage to let him handle all the business details. Isabella's phone buzzed, a text from her sister Sarah. "Lunch today? You need to get out of that tower." She was about to respond when she heard the elevator ding in the private foyer. Marcus never returned this early. Her heart leapt with something, between hope and suspicion, as she turned toward the sound of approaching footsteps. "Bella?" Marcus's voice carried that familiar note of distraction. Even when he spoke to her, it felt like he was thinking about something else. "In here," she called softly. Marcus Sterling entered the living room like he owned the world, which in many ways he did. At 38, he still possessed the lean frame of the college athlete he'd once been, though stress lines had begun to etch themselves around his steel-gray eyes. His custom-tailored suit probably cost more than most people's cars, and he wore it with the casual confidence of someone born to wealth and power. "I forgot my backup laptop," he said without preamble, heading toward his home office. "The Yamamoto deal is falling apart, and I need the files from—" "Marcus!" Isabella's voice stopped him mid-stride. "When was the last time we talked? Really talked?" He paused, his hand on the office door handle. For a moment, Isabella thought she saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd courted her with handwritten letters and surprise. "Weekend getaways to vineyards in Napa." "Bella, not now. This deal is worth $300 million. If it falls through, I'm pregnant with your children, and I feel like a stranger in my own marriage." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Marcus turned, and for a heartbeat, Isabella saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Guilt? Regret? But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "You're being dramatic," he said, but his tone wasn't entirely dismissive. "After the Yamamoto acquisition closes, we'll take a baby moon, somewhere tropical, the Maldives maybe." It was the same promise he'd been making for months, always contingent on the next deal, the next merger, the next billion-dollar acquisition. Isabella placed a protective hand over her swollen belly, feeling one of the twins kick as if responding to her rising frustration. "I don't want the Maldives, Marcus. I want my husband." But he was already disappearing into his office. Isabella heard the sound of drawers opening, papers shuffling, and then the familiar beep of his laptop powering up. She stood there for several minutes, listening to the rapid clicking of keys before finally retreating to the master bedroom. The other woman across town, in a converted warehouse in Soho, Natalia Reeves stood before her easel, paintbrush trembling in her hand. At 26, she possessed a wild, untamed beauty that was the antithesis of everything Manhattan's elite valued. Her dark hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and her olive skin bore the gentle kiss of someone who spent time outdoors rather than in climate-controlled boardrooms. She was the kind of woman who looked equally stunning in paint-stained jeans and a cocktail dress. But today she couldn't focus on her art. Her phone sat on the nearby table, silent as an accusation. The painting before her was one of her best, a swirling abstract that captured the chaos of desire and guilt that had consumed her life for the past 8 months. It was meant for her upcoming gallery showing, the one that could finally establish her as more than just another struggling artist in New York's oversaturated art scene. Instead, all she could think about was him, Marcus. Their relationship had begun innocently enough. Marcus Sterling, billionaire businessman, had purchased 3 of her paintings from a small gallery in Chelsea. She'd been stunned when his assistant called to arrange a private meeting. Apparently, he was interested in commissioning a piece for his corporate offices. She should have known then. Should have recognized the predatory gleam in his eyes when he'd walked into her studio, looking absurdly out of place among her canvases and scattered tubes of paint. Should have said no when he'd asked her to dinner to discuss the commission. But she'd been struggling to pay rent, surviving on ramen noodles and the occasional modeling gig. The commission he'd offered would have covered 6 months of expenses. And Marcus Sterling, with his penetrating gaze and quiet confidence, had been intoxicating in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. The first dinner had led to a second. Then late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn. Then stolen afternoons in hotel rooms where they'd lose themselves in each other's bodies and forget about the outside world. Natalia had known from the beginning that he was married, had seen the wedding ring he never bothered to remove, had heard him take calls from Bella with practiced tenderness that made her stomach twist with jealousy and self-loathing. But Marcus had painted a picture of a marriage in name only, a wife who cared more about social status than love, who'd grown cold and distant. "She doesn't understand me the way you do," he'd whispered against her neck one afternoon as rain drummed against the windows of their usual suite at the plaza. "With you, I can be myself. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just Marcus." It had been a lie, of course. She understood that now. But at the time, with his hands in her hair and his voice rough with desire, she'd wanted desperately to believe it. Her phone finally rang, and Natalia's heart jumped. But it wasn't Marcus's name on the display. It was her gallery director. "Simon?" "Natalia, darling, we have a problem." Simon's cultured British accent carried a note of panic. "The Times critic is coming to the preview tonight instead of Friday. We need to have everything perfect, and I need to know. Will your mystery patron be attending?" Natalia's mouth went dry. Marcus had promised to come to her opening, had even suggested he might bring some of his wealthy friends who collected art. But that was before she'd made her demand 3 nights ago. "I need more than this," she'd told him as they lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, their bodies still humming from lovemaking that had been particularly intense. "I can't keep being your secret, Marcus. I want to be able to call you when I need you. I want to be part of your real life." Marcus had gone still beside her, his hand freezing where it had been tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Natalia, you know it's complicated. Give me a key to your office." The words had surprised even her. "I want to be able to see you, whenever I need to, not just when you can sneak away." "That's impossible. The security, my staff. Then this is impossible." She'd sat up, pulling the sheet around her body like armor. "I won't be your dirty little secret anymore, Marcus. I deserve better than stolen afternoons and lies." He'd left that night without giving her an answer. That had been 3 days ago, and she hadn't heard from him since. "Natalia? Are you there?" Simon's voice pulled her back to the present. "I'm here. And no, I don't think he'll be coming after all." Isabella stood in Marcus's home office, her heart pounding so hard she was certain it would wake the twins. She'd never invaded her husband's privacy like this before, but something had driven her here, a desperate need to understand why the man she'd married seemed to slip further away with each passing day. The laptop Marcus had retrieved that morning still sat open on his desk, forgotten in his rush to return to the office. The screen had gone dark, but when Isabella touched the trackpad, it blazed to life, revealing a desktop she'd never seen before. Among the usual business folders and financial documents, one file caught her attention. N. Personal. Isabella's finger hovered over the trackpad. She knew that opening this file would cross a line in their marriage, a boundary that couldn't be uncrossed. But the twins chose that moment to kick, reminding her that she wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She had a right to know what kind of man was fathering her children. The folder contained dozens of photos, and Isabella's world tilted on its axis as she clicked through them. A beautiful young woman with dark hair and paint-stained fingers. The same woman laughing at a restaurant table, candlelight playing across her features. The woman in Marcus's arms outside what appeared to be an art gallery. And then, the one that made Isabella's knees buckle. Marcus and the woman in bed, his hand tangled in her hair, both of them looking at the camera with the lazy satisfaction of lovers who had all the time in the world. Isabella gripped the edge of the desk, her breath coming in short gasps that bordered on hyperventilation. The date stamp on the photos went back 8 months, long before her pregnancy, back when she'd still believed her marriage was simply going through a rough patch that success and time would smooth over. With shaking fingers, she opened his email. Client. If she'd thought the photos were devastating, the emails were a knife to the heart. Hundreds of messages between Marcus and someone named Natalia Reeves, full of intimate details and passionate declarations that her husband had never shared with her. I can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon, the way you looked when I touched you. I've never wanted anyone the way I want you. Marcus. You make me feel like I'm finally awake after years of sleepwalking through my life. Natalia, I wish I could wake up next to you every morning instead of pretending to be someone I'm not. Marcus Isabella's vision blurred with tears as she read message after message, watching her marriage dissolve before her eyes. But it was the most recent email thread that nearly stopped her heart entirely. I need more than stolen moments, Marcus. I need to know I matter to you. Natalia, you matter more than you know. Let me prove it to you. Marcus, then give me a key to your office. Show me that I'm not just your secret shame. Natalia, I'll have one made for you today. You're right. You deserve more than I've been giving you. Marcus, the timestamp showed the message had been sent that very morning, after Marcus had returned home and lied about forgetting his laptop. Isabella closed the laptop and sat back in Marcus's leather chair, one hand pressed to her stomach where their children grew, the other covering her mouth to stifle the sobs that threatened to escape. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of believing in their love story, and she'd been nothing more than the wife he tolerated while his real passion lay elsewhere. But as the initial shock began to fade, another emotion took its place. Not just hurt, but rage, white-hot fury that burned through her grief and crystallized into something harder and sharper than diamonds. Marcus Sterling thought he could play her for a fool, thought he could install his mistress in the very building Isabella owned, using her own property as the site of his betrayal. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The revelation, Isabella spent the rest of the day in a state of controlled fury, moving through her penthouse like a ghost haunting her own life. She made lunch she couldn't eat, started books she couldn't focus on, and found herself standing at windows staring at nothing while her mind raced through 5 years of marriage, looking for signs she'd missed. They'd been there, of course. The late nights that grew later, the business trips that seemed more frequent, the way Marcus's phone had become an extension of his hand, buzzing with messages that made him smile in ways that used to be reserved for her alone. By evening, Isabella, had made her decision. She called her sister Sarah and asked her to come over, then placed a second call to someone she hadn't spoken to in months. David Chen, the attorney who'd handled the legal paperwork when Marcus gave her the Sterling Tower as a wedding gift. Isabella. "Sterling, what a pleasant surprise." David's warm voice carried genuine affection. They'd been friends since law school, though their paths had diverged when Isabella chose marriage over her own legal career. "How are you feeling?" Sarah mentioned. "You're expecting twins." "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Isabella's voice was steadier than she felt. "The Sterling Tower, legally, who owns it?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You do, of course. We structured it as a premarital gift held in separate trust. Even in a divorce, Marcus would have no claim to it." "Why do you ask?" "And I can make decisions about the building, about who has access?" "Absolutely. You're the sole owner and decision-maker." "Isabella, is everything all right? You sound—" "I'm fine, David. Better than fine, actually. I'll call you tomorrow." When Sarah arrived an hour later, she found Isabella in the kitchen, making tea with the kind of precise, controlled movements that usually meant her sister was either very calm or very dangerous. "You sounded strange on the phone," Sarah said, settling onto one of the bar stools. "What's going on?" Sarah Montgomery was everything. Isabella wasn't. A successful prosecutor with sharp edges and a tongue that could fillet a lying witness. 2 years younger but infinitely more cynical, she'd never trusted Marcus's too-perfect charm. Isabella slid a cup of chamomile tea across the marble counter and then placed Marcus's laptop between them. "I found out why my husband has been so distracted lately." For the next hour, Isabella walked Sarah through her discovery, watching her sister's expression grow darker with each revealed email and photograph. By the time she finished, Sarah was pacing the kitchen like a caged predator. "That bastard," Sarah snarled. "That absolute, unmitigated bastard. You're 6 months pregnant with his children, and he's playing house with some 20-something artist?" 26, Isabella corrected automatically. "Her name is Natalia Reeves, and apparently she's having a gallery showing tonight that Marcus promised to attend." Sarah stopped pacing. "How do you know that?" Isabella pulled up the gallery's website on her phone. "I did some research. Emerging artist, first major solo show. The preview is tonight at the Meridian Gallery in Chelsea." She looked up at her sister. "I think I should go." "Isabella, no. You're pregnant and emotional, and confronting them in public isn't—" "I'm not going to confront anyone," Isabella said calmly. "I'm going to introduce myself to my husband's mistress, woman to woman. I think she deserves to know exactly what kind of man she's sleeping with." Sarah stared at her sister for a long moment, then slowly smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm coming with you." The Meridian Gallery buzzed with the kind of controlled chaos that marked a successful art opening. Beautiful people in beautiful clothes sipped wine and made pronouncements about composition and color theory, while servers in black uniforms wove, between them with trays of canapes. Isabella stood in the doorway, taking in the scene with the calculating gaze of a general surveying a battlefield. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a flowing black dress that made her pregnancy look elegant rather than cumbersome, paired with the diamond necklace Marcus had given her for their 4th anniversary. She wanted to look every inch the Billionaire's wife. Sarah flanked her like a bodyguard, resplendent in a red dress that screamed, "Prosecutor on the prowl." "There," Sarah murmured, nodding toward a cluster of people near the back of the gallery. "That's her, isn't it?" Isabella's gaze found Natalia Reeves immediately. The photos hadn't done her justice. In person, she was luminous, glowing with the kind of nervous excitement that came from seeing your dreams made manifest. She wore a simple white dress that somehow managed to look both innocent and sophisticated. Her dark hair loose around her shoulders, she was beautiful. Isabella had to give her that. But as Isabella watched, she noticed something else. Natalia kept glancing toward the entrance, her smile faltering slightly each time someone new entered, who wasn't the person she was obviously waiting for. "He's not here," Isabella murmured. "What?" "Marcus. He promised to come, but he's not here. Look at her. She's waiting for someone who isn't coming." As if summoned by Isabella's observation, Natalia's phone buzzed. Isabella watched the younger woman check it, saw her face fall slightly, and then watched her paste on a bright smile as she returned to her conversation with potential buyers. "The coward couldn't even show up to support her," Sarah said with disgust. "What do you want to do?" Isabella straightened her shoulders and began moving through the crowd with the kind of graceful authority that came from years of charity galas and board meetings. She might be a betrayed wife, but she was also Isabella Montgomery Sterling, and she'd been navigating social minefields since childhood. She stopped in front of one of Natalia's paintings, the abstract piece that seemed to swirl with passion and chaos. It was, Isabella had to admit, genuinely talented work. "It's beautiful," she said to the gallery director, who appeared at her elbow with the kind of attentiveness that expensive jewelry and perfect posture commanded. "Very emotional. Raw." "Miss Reeves is extraordinarily gifted," the man, Simon according to his name tag, gushed. "This particular piece is called Desire in Blue. It's one of her most personal works." "I can see that." Isabella let her gaze travel over the painting, seeing in its turbulent brushstrokes the same chaos that had consumed her own life. "I'd like to meet the artist." Within moments, Simon was leading her across the gallery, Sarah trailing in her wake like an elegant storm cloud. "Natalia, darling, there's someone who'd very much like to meet you," Simon announced. "This is Mrs. Isabella." "Sterling?" Isabella said, extending her hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm a great admirer of your work." The effect was immediate and devastating. All the color drained from Natalia's face, and her hand trembled as she automatically reached out to shake Isabella's. Around them, the gallery continued to hum with conversation, but Isabella felt as though they existed in a bubble of terrible intimacy. "Mrs. Sterling," Natalia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. It's nice to meet you. Please, call me Isabella, and this is my sister, Sarah Montgomery." Sarah stepped forward with a smile that could have cut glass. "Your paintings are extraordinary," Isabella continued, as if this were any normal social interaction. "So full of passion. You can really feel the artist's intensity in every brush stroke." Natalia's composure was cracking visibly. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape route, and Isabella almost felt sorry for her. "Almost. I understand you know my husband," Isabella said conversationally. "Marcus Sterling? He mentioned commissioning some work from you." Yes, Natalia seemed incapable of forming complete sentences. "He speaks very highly of your talent." Isabella let the pause hang in the air just long enough to be uncomfortable. "In fact, I believe he was planning to attend tonight. What a shame he couldn't make it. Some last-minute business emergency, I'm sure you understand." The cruelty in Isabella's tone was so subtle that anyone overhearing would have missed it entirely, but Natalia heard it loud and clear. Her hand moved unconsciously to her phone, as if she wanted to check again for messages that clearly weren't coming. "He's very dedicated to his work," Natalia said finally, and Isabella had to admire her for attempting to rally. "Oh, I know. 18-hour days, constant travel, always chasing the next big deal." Isabella's smile grew sharper. "It doesn't leave much time for the people who matter to him. But I'm sure you understand that. Being involved with a married man." The words hung in the air like a blade, and Isabella watched Natalia's last pretense of composure shatter. Around them, the gallery chatter continued, but Isabella could see other guests beginning to notice the tension radiating from their small group. "I think," Sarah said smoothly, "we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." Chapter 6. The confrontation. The gallery's back office was a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and half-empty wine glasses left over from the setup crew. Simon had reluctantly given them access after Isabella had asked, with the kind of polite insistence that brooked no argument, for a quiet place to discuss a potential major purchase. Now, with the door closed behind them, the three women faced each other in a triangle of barely contained emotion. "How long?" Isabella asked without preamble. Natalia had recovered some of her composure in the privacy of the office, but her hands still shook as she clasped them in front of her. "Mrs. Sterling, I don't think—" "How long?" Isabella's voice could have frozen champagne. 8 months. The admission seemed to deflate Natalia. It started 8 months ago. Isabella did the math quickly. 8 months ago, she and Marcus had been trying for a baby. They'd been making love regularly, tenderly, with the kind of hope and intimacy that she'd thought meant their marriage was finally hitting its stride. Meanwhile, he'd been fucking this girl in hotel rooms and art studios. "Did you know?" Isabella asked. "About the babies?" Natalia's confusion was clearly genuine. "Babies? I'm 6 months pregnant, with twins." Isabella placed a protective hand over her stomach. "Your lover is going to be a father in 3 months, and he's been too busy playing house with you to mention it." The color that had finally returned to Natalia's cheeks drained away again. She sank into one of the office chairs as if her legs could no longer support her. "He said—" Natalia's voice cracked. "He said you two barely spoke anymore. That you lived separate lives in the same house. He never mentioned that I'm carrying his children. That we've been trying for a baby for 2 years. Isabella's laugh was bitter. How surprising that he left out those little details. Sarah, who had been watching the exchange with prosecutorial intensity, leaned forward. "What else did he tell? You about his marriage? That it was over in everything but name? That Isabella, that you." Natalia looked up at Isabella with something that might have been the beginning of understanding. "He said you only cared about the social status, that you'd grown cold and distant." "Cold and distant," Isabella repeated. "While I was planning charity galas for his company, hosting dinner parties for his business associates, and managing a household staff of 12 so he could focus on work. While I was undergoing fertility treatments and hormone injections, hoping to give him the family he said he wanted." Each word was delivered with surgical precision, and Isabella watched them hit Natalia like physical blows. Good. She wanted the girl to understand exactly what she'd been participating in. "I didn't know," Natalia whispered. "I swear to you, I didn't know about the babies, about the fertility treatments." He made it sound like you two were already divorced in everything but paperwork. "But you knew he was married," Sarah interjected. "You knew you were sleeping with another woman's husband." Natalia's chin came up with a flash of defiance. "Yes, I knew he was married, but I believed." "You believed what you wanted to believe?" Isabella said quietly. "Because it was easier than admitting you were helping a man betray his wife." The silence that followed was broken only by the muffled sounds of the gallery opening continuing in the next room. Isabella studied Natalia's face, seeing the war between guilt and self-justification playing out in her expressions. "He gave you a key," Isabella said finally, "to his office." Natalia's hand moved instinctively to her purse, as if protecting something valuable. "How did you—" "I read his emails. All of them." Isabella's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Did you know that the Sterling Tower belongs to me? Not Marcus, me. It was my wedding gift, held in a separate trust that he has no legal claim to." Understanding dawned in Natalia's eyes, along with something that looked like fear. "That's right," Isabella continued. "The building where my husband planned to install you as his convenient little secret, I own it. Every floor, every office, every key card. That grants access. What are you going to do? Natalia's voice was barely audible. Isabella considered the question, feeling the weight of her unborn children and the ashes of her marriage pressing down on her. She could destroy this girl. One phone call to the building's security, and Natalia would find herself barred from ever setting foot in Sterling Tower again. A few well-placed words in the right social circles, and her budding art career could be strangled in its cradle. But looking at Natalia now, young, talented, and clearly devastated by the realization of what she'd been part of, Isabella found herself taking a different path. "I'm going to give you a choice," she said finally. "You can continue this affair, knowing what you know now, knowing that you're helping a man betray his pregnant wife and unborn children, knowing that every moment you spend with him is stolen from his family." Natalia flinched as if Isabella had struck her. "Or," Isabella continued, "you can end it, tonight, completely, and maybe, we can both figure out how to move forward with our lives." "And if I choose to end it," Natalia asked, "then you'll never hear from me again. Your career will be safe, your reputation intact, but Marcus will be off limits to you forever. No contact, no communication, no closure meetings that turn into relapses." Isabella's voice hardened. "Because make no mistake, if you continue this affair after tonight, I will destroy you. Professionally, socially, and in every way that matters. I have the power to do it, and I won't hesitate to use it." Natalia stared at her for a long moment, and Isabella saw the exact moment when the younger woman truly understood the magnitude of her situation. "I need to think," Natalia whispered. "You have until midnight," Isabella said, standing with the fluid grace that pregnancy hadn't yet compromised. "After that, I'll assume you've made your choice, and I'll act accordingly." As Isabella moved toward the door, Natalia's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Sterling, Isabella?" When Isabella turned back, she saw tears streaming down the younger woman's face. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am genuinely sorry." For a moment, Isabella's carefully constructed composure cracked, and Natalia caught a glimpse of the raw pain beneath the polished exterior. "So am I," Isabella said quietly. "More than you'll ever know." The reckoning Isabella returned to the penthouse that night, feeling like a soldier returning from battle, exhausted, scarred, but somehow victorious. Sarah had wanted to come up with her, but Isabella needed to be alone to process what had happened and prepare for what came next. Marcus was home, which surprised her. She found him in his study, still in his business suit despite the late hour, staring at his computer screen with an expression of intense concentration. "How was your evening?" she asked from the doorway, her voice carefully neutral. He looked up, and for a moment Isabella thought she saw guilt flash across his features, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Long day. The Yamamoto deal is still hanging by a thread." He rubbed his eyes tiredly. "How was yours? You look dressed up." Isabella looked down at her black dress and diamond necklace. She'd forgotten she was still wearing her armor from the gallery opening. "I went to an art opening with Sarah, in Chelsea." She watched his face carefully as she spoke, looking for any sign of recognition. Nothing. Marcus's expression remained politely interested, but distant. "Anyone I know?" The casual nature of the question, the absolute lack of concern or curiosity, hit Isabella like a physical blow. He'd promised to attend Natalia's opening, had been exchanging passionate emails with her for months, and yet he could ask about it with the same tone he'd used to inquire about the weather. A young artist named Natalia Reeves, Isabella said. "Very talented, very beautiful." This time there was no mistaking Marcus's reaction. He went completely still, his fingers freezing over the keyboard, and Isabella saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. "Never heard of her?" he said, but his voice was slightly hoarse. "Really? That's strange. I could have sworn someone mentioned." that you'd commissioned work from her. Isabella stepped into the study, moving with predatory grace. In fact, I met her tonight. Lovely girl. She seemed surprised when I introduced myself as your wife. Marcus's face had gone pale, but he was still trying to maintain the facade. Bella, I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Marcus. I'm stating facts. Isabella's voice was deadly calm. I know about the affair. I know about the hotel rooms and the stolen afternoons and the key you promised to give her to your office. I know about the emails and the photographs and the lies you've been telling both of us for 8 months. The silence that followed was so complete that Isabella could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system. Marcus stared at her with the expression of a man who'd just watched his world collapse, and Isabella felt a savage satisfaction in finally seeing him stripped of his composure. How? He asked finally. Your laptop, the one you so conveniently forgot this morning. Isabella moved to stand behind his chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same scent that had once made her heart race and now made her stomach turn. Did you really think you could hide an 8-month affair from me forever? Or were you just planning to keep us both on the hook indefinitely? Marcus spun the chair around to face her, and Isabella saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before: fear. Bella, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you seduced a 26-year-old while I was undergoing fertility treatments. How you made love to me and then went straight to her bed. How you told her I was a cold, distant wife while I was carrying your children. Each question hit Marcus like a hammer blow, and Isabella watched him shrink under the weight of his exposed sins. The babies, he started. She didn't know, Isabella cut him off. Your precious Natalia had no idea I was pregnant, just like she had no idea that you've been lying to her as systematically as you've been lying to me. Marcus buried his face in his hands, and for a moment, Isabella almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I never meant for it to happen, he said finally, his voice muffled. It started as a business transaction, and then you decided you wanted to fuck her. Isabella's crude language made Marcus flinch, but she was past caring. About propriety. Don't try to romanticize it, Marcus. You made a choice. Every day for 8 months, you made the choice to betray your wife and unborn children. What do you want from me? Marcus looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. I'll end it. Tonight. I'll never see her again. We can go to counseling, It's too late for that. Isabella's voice was arctic. You didn't just betray me, Marcus. You betrayed our children. You chose another woman over the family we were building together. Then what? Do you want a divorce? Is that what this is about? Isabella studied her husband's face. The man she'd loved for 7 years, married for 5, and trusted with her heart and future. She tried to find some remnant of the person she'd fallen for, some spark of the man who'd once written her love letters and surprised her with weekend getaways. All she saw was a stranger who looked tired and guilty and desperately afraid of losing his comfortable life. I don't know what I want yet, she said finally, but I know what you're going to do. Tomorrow morning, you're going to go to your office, and you're going to remove every trace of Natalia Reeves from your life. Delete her contact information, destroy any gifts she gave you, forget she exists. And then you're going to move out of this penthouse and into one of your corporate apartments. You'll have minimal contact with me until after the babies are born, and then we'll discuss what kind of relationship, if any, we're going to have going forward. Marcus stared at her in shock. You're throwing me out. I'm protecting my children from a father who's proven he can't be trusted to put their welfare above his own desires. Isabella's hand moved protectively to her stomach. They deserve better than a man who was cheating on their mother before they were even born. Isabella woke to an empty bed and the sound of suitcases rolling across marble floors. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe it was just another business trip, another week of Marcus traveling while she managed their life alone. But then the events of the previous night crashed over her like a tsunami, and she remembered, this time, he wasn't coming back. She found him in the foyer, loading the last of his belongings into expensive leather luggage. He'd clearly been up. All night, his usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his silver hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "The car's waiting downstairs," he said without looking at her. His voice was hoarse, defeated. Isabella wrapped her silk robe tighter around her expanding waist and studied the man who had been her husband, her lover, her partner in building. What she'd thought was a perfect life. In the harsh morning light streaming through the penthouse windows, Marcus looked older than his 38 years, worn down by guilt and the weight of his choices. "Where will you go?" she asked, though she wasn't sure why she cared. "The Midtown corporate apartment. It's already furnished." He finally looked at her, and Isabella was startled by the pain in his steel-gray eyes. "Bella, I know you don't want to hear this, but I need you to know. I love you. I've always loved you." The words that should have brought comfort instead felt like salt in an open wound. Love isn't something you feel, Marcus. It's something you do. It's choices you make. Every day, Isabella's hand moved protectively to her belly, where one of the twins was already active, responding to her elevated heart rate. "And for 8 months, every day, you chose her over me." Marcus flinched as if she'd struck him. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Isabella's composure cracked, and for the first time since discovering the affair, she let her rage show. "Tell me how you justify making love to your pregnant wife and then running to your mistress. Explain how I love you is compatible with giving another woman the key to your office while your wife carries your children." "I was confused," Marcus said desperately. "The pressure of the business, the fertility treatments, everything changing so fast. So you found comfort between another woman's legs." Isabella's voice could have cut glass. "How noble of you." Marcus grabbed the handle of his largest suitcase, his knuckles white with tension. "What do you want me to say, Bella? That I'm a bastard? That I destroyed the best thing in my life for a meaningless fling?" "Fine. I'm saying it. But that doesn't change the fact that I love you and I want to fight for our marriage." "Our marriage died the moment you put your hands on her," Isabella said quietly. "Everything since then has just been the funeral." The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and Marcus stepped inside, his luggage surrounding him like the wreckage of their life together. As the doors began to close, Isabella called out to him. "Marcus?" He looked up hopefully, and she almost felt sorry for the desperate relief in his expression. "The key card for your office has been deactivated. Security has instructions that Ms. Reeves is not to be admitted to the building under any circumstances." The hope died in Marcus's eyes, replaced by something that looked like panic. "Bella, please don't punish her for my mistakes," but the elevator doors had already closed, carrying her cheating husband out of her life. Isabella stood in the silent foyer for a long moment, listening to the hum of the building's systems and the distant sound of Manhattan traffic 43 floors below. Then she walked to her phone and dialed David Chen's number. "Isabella? It's early. Is everything all right?" "David, I need you to draft divorce papers. I want them filed today." Chapter 9. The Artist's Dilemma. Natalia hadn't slept. She'd spent the night in her Soho studio, pacing among her canvases like a caged animal, her phone clutched in her hand as she waited for messages that never came. The gallery opening had been a success. She'd sold 3 paintings and received commitments for 2 more commissions. It should have been the best night of her career. Instead, it felt like the end of everything. She'd replayed her conversation with Isabella Sterling 1,000 times, examining every word, every inflection. The pregnant woman's controlled fury had been terrifying, but there had been something else underneath. A bone-deep pain that Natalia recognized because she'd been feeling it herself for months. The pain of loving someone who could never fully belong to you. By dawn, Natalia had made her decision. She dressed carefully in jeans and a simple blouse, gathered the few gifts Marcus had given her, a cashmere scarf, a pair of pearl earrings, a first edition of Neruda's poetry, and headed for Sterling Tower. The morning rush hour crowd provided perfect camouflage as she approached the gleaming skyscraper that had become the symbol of her secret life. She'd been here dozens of times over the past 8 months, always using the private elevator that Marcus had arranged, always feeling like she was stealing something precious and forbidden. Today, she walked through the front entrance like any other visitor. "I'm here to see Marcus Sterling," she told the receptionist, a perfectly groomed woman who radiated the kind of professional competence that came from working for billionaires. "Do you have an appointment?" The receptionist's fingers hovered over her keyboard, ready to check the calendar. "Tell him Natalia Reeves is here. He'll see me." The receptionist made the call, her voice dropping to the discreet murmur that expensive corporations train their employees to use. Natalia watched her face change from professional courtesy to confusion to something that looked like embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Ms. Reeves, but Mr. Sterling is in meetings all day. Perhaps you could—" "Tell him I have something that belongs to him," Natalia interrupted. "Something I need to return personally." Another call, another whispered conversation. This time, the receptionist's expression shifted to barely concealed curiosity. "Mr. Sterling will see you now. 47th floor, corner office, the elevator. I know the way." The ride to the 47th floor felt like ascending to her own execution. Natalia clutched the small bag containing Marcus's gifts, her knuckles white with tension. She'd been in his office before, but always after hours, always in secret. Walking through the executive floor in broad daylight felt like stepping into an alien world where she clearly didn't belong. Marcus's assistant, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, barely glanced up from her computer. "Go right in. He's expecting you." Natalia pushed open the heavy oak door and found Marcus standing with his back to her, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Manhattan skyline. He'd clearly been there all night. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and when he turned to face her, she could see the exhaustion and guilt etched into every line of his face. "Natalia." Her name was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." She set the bag down on his desk next to a framed photograph of his wedding day. The irony wasn't lost on her. Isabella Sterling, radiant in white silk and diamonds, smiling up at the camera with the kind of pure joy that Natalia now knew she'd helped destroy. "I came to return these." Marcus's gaze fell on the bag, and something that looked like pain flickered across his features. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Natalia's voice was steadier than she felt. "I met your wife last night." Marcus went very still. "What did she tell you?" "The truth. Something you forgot how to do months ago." Natalia sank into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, suddenly feeling exhausted. "She's pregnant, Marcus, 6 months, with twins, and you never thought to mention that minor detail?" "It's complicated." "It's not complicated at all." Natalia's composure finally cracked, and 8 months of suppressed doubts and ignored red flags came pouring out. "You lied to me about everything, about your marriage, about your wife, about what you wanted from me." Marcus moved around the desk and knelt beside her chair, reaching for her hands. "Natalia, please, you have to understand." She jerked away from his touch. "Understand what? That you were so unhappy in your marriage that you forgot to mention. Your wife was undergoing fertility treatments while you were fucking me? That you were so emotionally neglected that you couldn't spare 5 minutes to tell me she was carrying your children? I was going to tell you when." After they were born? After you'd installed me as your permanent mistress in the building your wife owns? Natalia stood abruptly, pacing to the windows where Marcus had been standing moments before. Did you know she owns this building? That every time you brought me here, you were using her property to cheat on her? Marcus's face had gone gray. She told you that? She told me a lot of things, including the fact that she could destroy my career with a phone call if I don't end this. Natalia turned to face him, and Marcus was shocked by the transformation in her face. The soft, adoring expression she'd worn for months was gone, replaced by something harder and more mature. But you know what? She didn't have to threaten me. Finding out the truth was enough.